Welcome to the Taking the Leap podcast, where you can learn how to launch your full-time career in this part-time gig economy. No matter what career you're in, you have the potential to be the best version of you and overcome whatever obstacles stand in your way. And now, here's your host, the CEO of Bonvera, Bob Dickey.
Welcome back to Taking the Leap podcast. I am your host, Bob Dickey, and I'm really excited about this episode. Our next guest, Jeremie Kubicek, is a great friend of mine. We found ourselves in a YPO forum out of Atlanta, Georgia for a number of years. And I really appreciated learning how Jeremie got his entrepreneurial start back when he was a little boy in the farm fields of the Midwest, and the discipline that his father taught him, and how that discipline transitioned into an incredible entrepreneurial journey where he found himself fresh out of college in the mid-90s in Russia, of all places, starting and leading companies shortly after the fall of the wall. And some of the stories and the things that he learned during that time period are really incredible. And he brings a lot of that wealth of knowledge and experience back to the United States. And one of the interesting things, he has a storied entrepreneurial career, founding over 20 plus companies in his career. And one of them was he went in with a group of investors and actually bought John Maxwell's company. So many of you know that John Maxwell is an incredible thought leader and leadership coach, not only here, but around the globe. And Jeremie actually bought that company and led it. At one point was leading one of the largest leadership conventions globally with over 150,000 plus attendees attending these conferences. At the time, it was called the Chick-fil-A Leadercast, and I believe right now it's just the Leadercast, but an incredible event that I've attended multiple times. But Jeremie founded many companies, led the John Maxwell company before a number of years ago, selling it back to John, and he himself is the author of a number of incredible books, one of which that you're going to hear in this episode, The 100X Leader. Jeremie talks about how we can be a liberating leader versus a dominating leader, and why our businesses, our nonprofits, why in our communities we need more liberating leaders in key positions as opposed to dominating leaders, and how devastating a dominating leader and that type of leadership style can be for people and for organizations. Jeremie is passionate about helping people live their best version of themselves. He's also passionate helping people increase their leadership abilities and to be able to maximize their God-given talents and potentials. So, without any further ado, I hope that you enjoy this episode of Taking the Leap podcast with our guest, Jeremie Kubicek. We've been friends for quite some time, and you have always been an encourager. You and I have been in YPO together for many years, and we were in forum together. And that's one of the things that I greatly appreciate about you is you're insightful, but you've been an incredible encourager for leaders. And that's kind of what you're doing right now in life, is you're working with senior leaders at organizations and helping them to be the best version of themselves. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because you gave a talk last night about being a liberating leader as opposed to a dominating leader, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we found is over the course of time, I've just worked with so many companies and started my own, and realizing tendencies that we all have. And some people have a tendency to just bring high challenge but not much support. Mm-hmm. And when they do that, they end up dominating people, and they don't necessarily know it. Doesn't mean they wake up and put their evil badge on. Yeah. They just simply wake up and go, they do what they've experienced. And so if you think about our upbringing, if you had a dad who was constantly bringing challenge but no support, or if you had a boss, or if that's all you've known, command and control in the military.
Right.
It's like, I'm the boss, you do what I say. Well, that doesn't really work in this next era. It doesn't build influence. And I think that's what's changing dramatically. So we just give language to the idea that a liberating leader brings empowerment and opportunity, but high challenge. And I think what happens, a lot of people pivot. They either go domination or they move all the way over to protecting. And protecting is high support, low challenge. And we're finding, no, the best leaders are both. We need leaders who bring unbelievably high challenge, but they need to establish support first. Mm-hmm. So that's part of what we've learned along the way, that the best leaders in the world gain influence because people want to be with them, not have to be with them. And I think that's a key point to know.
So for the listeners who are listening right now and they want to learn more about these concepts, one of the things that you shared over breakfast is that one of the things that you want to be able to do is take sometimes difficult, maybe confusing or complex things and break it down to make it really easy to understand and applicable for anybody to be able to apply in their life. And so for our listeners, what book, because you've written multiple books, but what book should they go out and use as a resource to study these principles and to learn more about it?
Yeah, so the 100X Leader probably is the culmination of all of our tools around personal, team, and culture. So if you're interested in going like a literal field guide, and then we also have GiANT GiANT.tv, that gives them insights into both. So if you're more visual, GiANT TV is probably better for you. If you're more of a reader, 100X Leader is definitely a field guide for them.
Everyone who wants to go and kind of take a look at some of those resources, we'll have that in the show notes for everybody. The 100X Leader, incredible talk that you gave last night. I've had multiple people throughout the course of over even the last 12 hours walk up and say probably one of the best talks that they've heard in the last decade. These are people who have been industry insiders for many, many years. Can you share a little bit about that mindset? I mean, one of the key principles that you pull out of the 100X Leader is the Sherpa mindset. Could you just share with us what is a 100X Leader and what is the Sherpa mindset?
Yeah, so the idea is, if you think about 100X, most leaders in the world are between 60 and 75% healthy. And I just keep watching those. I'm sure you do too. You're around people, and it's like just the everyday minutia of business and work and kids and life starts to drain people. And the older they get, they're either energized and actually moving up or they're moving down. Most are moving down. And so this whole idea of being 75% is what most people experience as the best in our world.
And this is when they're like the proverbial treadmill. You're middle of your career. You're on that treadmill. You feel like you're running, and never getting ahead. It's just you're trying to like not fall off the back of it, right?
That's right. Yeah. But to go to what would be 90, 95, 100? What would it look like? What would have to happen for you, the listener, to move from 75 or 80 to a 95 plus? That's one. But then the other side is there's divisive people, there's negative people, there's positive people. But then there's multipliers, and that is a completely different mindset. So to move from 75 to 100 is one journey, but to move from a plus to an X. And so the word I was using last night was most people, the best leaders in the world, are positively reactive. But there's a difference between positive reactive versus positively proactive. And proactive is the ability to look and see people and what level they need to be at and help them get to that level. So then the Sherpa is the best metaphor for that, because the Sherpa are the people on Mount Everest. They're a people group. They help climbers get to the next level. You cannot climb, by the way, Mount Everest. No one's been able to make it without a Sherpa, even the very first climber. So it's just the idea.
Sir Edmund Hillary had a Sherpa. Had Sherpas.
Yeah. So therefore, if you think about it, no one really can climb without someone else. You didn't make it. I didn't make it where I am without someone helping us along the way, a Sherpa in our life at certain periods of time. So for you and I and all the leaders listening to be a Sherpa means that I fight for the highest possible good. I create support. I would put the ropes and the ladders for people climbing. Then I come behind them and challenge them. If I challenge people with no support lines, I'm sending people out to their death. If I always bring support and carry them up the mountain, then I'm protecting them and they're never really climbing. So it's a combination of support and challenge together, and that's where the Sherpa metaphor comes in.
Well, I think in the business sector, it's become somewhat ubiquitous for people to talk about, well, I have a personal coach, I have a personal mentor. We know those are words that we hear thrown around and used quite frequently. And I think that the thing that I really appreciate about this book and how you are encouraging leaders to think about maybe coaching and mentoring differently is because when you frame it up as a Sherpa, you're like, okay, it's not just sitting down over coffee and having, a 5-minute or 5-hour conversation, but it's looking at that role and being very intentional. So you're not, you're dominating, but you're offering support. But you're also challenging. You're doing it in a very artful way. And so I could see within the audience last night people who are very well versed in the concepts and like, oh my goodness, this is a game changer. I can just tweak this. I can tweak that. I can get better. And so it's awesome.
Yeah, because think about it. Most people just haven't thought about this big idea. Like leadership is 2 full-time jobs. There's the performance of the leader, and then there's the leading of other performers. So you may be really good, if you're listening, you may be really good at performing. So that's awesome. You're great, but you may not be, you might be accidental in leading other performers. So leadership is a Sherpa. It's like you have to climb. A Sherpa has to climb. So we were joking last night about the asthmatic Sherpa. Yeah. It's like you don't want an asthmatic Sherpa. You don't want someone who's barely being able to make it to the next level. But they're the studs on the mountain. They're the people who are up and down the mountain constantly.
They're like climbing the mountain 2 and 3 times, where somebody else that they're helping might only be climbing it once because they're going up and back, right?
That's right. Yeah. So for the listener to go, hey, we have to be the healthiest leaders in the room. If we're leading something significant, then we have to go before other people. That means we have to do more. And usually people get paid more for that. But then the reality is we have to perform. But then we have to cognitively learn how to lead other people up the mountain. So if all of a sudden, all of you are listening, if we're climbing Mount Everest, and we go, hey, we made it. Good job. You made it at the top. We're back at base camp. I'm going to give you 3 days. And after 3 days, you've got to take 3 people up the mountain. Would you know how to do that? That's multiplying. Would you go, oh my gosh, it's one thing for you to climb, but now you got to take whiny people whose zipper, my zipper won't, and it's cold and all this stuff.
I don't like the food.
Yeah.
Right. I'm tired. Yeah. So I want the Facebook picture at the top, but I don't want to have to do the work to get there. Right.
That's right. So that is the idea. Is like, actually, we have to be prepared, and we have to learn how do we take other people up the mountain. Well, some people are like, get up here, just go, and it's like, no. So I joke often. I'll say, the golden rule, everyone knows the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you'd want done to yourself. The platinum rule, which I didn't make up, but the platinum rule basically is actually different because the golden rule, I don't need a hug. Why should you?
Yeah. There's an easy way out of it. It's
I don't need support.
I treat myself horrible, so I'll treat you horrible.
Yeah. It's like saying to your wife, well, why don't you tell her? I told her I loved her when we got married.
Yeah.
If it changes, I'll let her know. Yeah. Right. Everyone's heard that before.
Yeah.
The platinum rule, though, is do unto others as they would want done to themselves. So if you think about leading people, you have to think, okay, wait, I don't need a lot of water or sunlight, or
I'm able to do it but somebody else might not.
That's right. That's where what we're getting into today, the 5 voices, make sense, because all of a sudden you start understanding the personality of another person and what they need to get to the next level. So the Sherpa, when I would talk to them, what was amazing about them is they intuitively know how to read people. But they don't have language for it per se, but they can go, okay, this person they're more of a feeler, this person's more logical. Based on what they're reading in people, they start then learning how to challenge people. And I think that's the nuance that most leaders don't do. They don't go deep enough in knowing the people they're leading. They treat everyone the same and expect results. And it just doesn't work that way.
Leadership, it seems to me that what you're diving into is that leadership is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. And that to be a really good leader, you have to be intuitive and understand that each person on your team is going to need different type of support or different type of challenge. And you kind of unpacked that a little bit last night. It's interesting for me to see. I mean, I know some of the companies that you're working with. I won't mention them. If you would like to mention them, I'll let you do that. But you're working with some of the biggest, most successful companies in America and around the world. You've got staff in multiple countries. leadership is when you go into a bookstore, the shelves are replete with leadership books for generations, right? I mean, you for a point in time in your career, you actually bought and ran the John Maxwell companies, and he is a phenomenal teacher of leadership. What do you see? There seems to be some type of transformation that's happening at companies. Are like, even though people have been reading these leadership books, like, we need to even double down. We need to get better. I was talking to a VC recently, and he said, you know what, Bob, the only thing that makes my companies unique and distinctive and will give me a competitive advantage over my competition is having a really in-depth leadership program and developing culture, but really developing great leaders within. I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, these are foundational principles that he's talking about. What's going on right now in corporate America that's kind of having this transformation?
All right, so let's first just let me make a big statement, because I'm going to say some radical things here, but I want to make a really strong point. Leader development is crucial. I mean, the development of people is crucial, and I think that's the key word. I think it's people development.
Okay.
Leader development is a part of it, but you want every single person on your organization to become more healthy, right?
Right.
And more effective. So there's a mix of IQ, like skills, actual skills to their job. Then there's emotional intelligence, and there's personality. We've never had more content than we have now. The problem is in content, because the publishers, this is the 80s and 90s, leadership became a thing. Before, it was managers.
Okay.
Then it became leadership in the mid 80s, and then the guru model came. And it was all based on a 20th century approach of learning and development. So the gurus would be big name, big stage, and it was butts and seats, sell them a book.
Big personality.
Yep.
Okay.
That was the whole thing. And because it was like...
You got some of that even today. I mean, I'm thinking of, I see some stadiums and people who are prolific on social media, and it's like, I'll teach you how to be this.
That's right. And so then those are seminars with 15 this, 20 that, 30 this, all these principles and these bullet points. The problem is adult learning has changed. We've changed dramatically. And so the 21st century... think about the digital age for a minute. We're on 24/7.
Yep.
After 2008, after the Great Recession, I mean, people had to take on more with less, right? So therefore, they stopped reading as much. So technology came.
Oh my goodness, I didn't connect those dots, but you're absolutely right.
So all of a sudden, you think about the technology component. You think about streaming services. You think about 5G that's about to hit. Content is now visual. It used to always be say leaders are readers. It's really leaders are listeners. Leaders are watchers. So I watch way more. I read far less, which is not good. It just is. And so because of that, I went to bed the other night. I'm going to go read, and Kelly comes in and says, "I thought you were going to read." I'm like, "Well, I am." As I'm looking at my phone, I was watching a documentary. I was kind of reading. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
In my mind, it was the same category. So what's happening is the 21st century, when you move into another century, it probably takes about 15 to 20 years for the transition to take place.
The norms to kind of set.
And that's where we're at. And so we're now in a 21st century of think about like geographically dispersed because of technology. My team, for instance, I have an office and I have offices. But my finance team's in Albuquerque, my sales team's in Naples, Florida, my ops teams are in London and Atlanta, and our marketing and our studios in Oklahoma City. Like, what? Because of digital technology, we can use Zoom and FaceTime.
Right.
So we see each other all the time.
Yep.
So that was never able, but the digital age has ushered in a disperse. Then you have the gig economy can get developed because of that. All those dynamics that have been taking place are affecting the way that we learn. So what's happening with companies we work with, like Google, what's happening with, even with the U.S. Air Force, they're making crazy changes, or any of our big companies and organizations we work with, what they're doing is they're realizing that 20th century learning, putting people in a classroom with a seminar or a book doesn't lead to transformation. So the idea of information transfer doesn't lead to transformation. But we had an information transfer process. That was all publishing was. So because there's so much information, Now there's too much. So now
I got to wade through all of this and say, what am I going to pick? What am I going to choose? What's going to work? What's not going to work?
So now collating and aggregating content from YouTube and this and that. Well, it's free, but no one's going to really do that. And no one's going to do it in a consistent way. So now you've got these leaders who are going, hey, I've got to make the donuts every day. And the donuts have to happen and clients need this. And like, I don't know. So is there a process? So that's all we've done is we've tried to basically create pathways for people to go, okay, what's the issue? Do you want to get your team to communicate at a higher level? Here's your pathway. Do you want to train your people? And so the idea is progress is a process, and there needs to be process, and there's pathways, and there's systems, but it needs to be done in visual, digital ways. I mean, I'm actually looking at our next book being a visual book. Not actually even writing, or actually making it a TV show. And we create TV series for leaders. So we just took Netflix and Peloton, put it together and created GiANT TV so people can binge watch 3 to 7 minute episodes. And that is where I believe that's where the whole industry needs to shift, but most people aren't. And those are going to die out with the 20th century guru model.
It's one of the things that we're very passionate about at Bondvera, and we've been implementing some new forms of training and development for our leaders with our, we call it's the New Way MBA, right? Because we understand that there is a whole new way of learning. The adult education space is rapidly changing, and so I'm looking forward to chatting with you more about the things that you're doing with GiANT and incorporating a lot of that in with Bondvera and with our leadership team. Tell us a little bit, before we pivot off of the 100X leader and that Sherpa mindset, there was something that I found really funny last night because we all experienced it, but I've never heard someone articulate it the way that you did. And it was the asthmatic Sherpa. This is a leader who has had success in their life, maybe in the past, but is currently not performing, but they're encouraging and trying to help people up the mountain, but they themselves are not healthy enough to do it. And with the problems that cause, can you share a little bit with our listeners about the asthmatic Sherpa? Because they're probably that was the most laughable moment of the evening when you were sharing about that.
So the idea, though, all of us have traded. We all have like glory days, right? I have them, you have them,
right?
And if I stop and I trade on those glory days, well, people can be around me and they can be really impressed. I mean, some of my glory days, we built the Catalyst conferences, built the Chick-fil-A LeaderCast. I mean, that was at one time, that was a thing.
It was the thing. I went to, you had like over 150,000 people globally.
85,000 was our number.
Wow. I'm sorry. I was
So 185, but that was our number. We're like, are you kidding me? And so
globally plugging in, listening. You had the best speakers. I mean, you had President Bush and, those types of speakers coming in.
Tony Blair, we spent Jim Collins, Malcolm Gladwell, all that stuff. If I traded on that, though, and most people do, I'm like, oh, great. Well, what have you done in this century?
What have you done in the last 10 years?
Yeah. And so, so we just created a Netflix meets Peloton. I mean, like that is where we're heading. So for a lot of you listening to think, it's awesome. What you've done is great, but you have to adapt with the times to go, what are you doing right now? You can't leverage your past to the degree that, and so you're losing credibility. So credibility and influence is almost a daily thing. And so I want to be someone that people want to follow. Therefore, I know you do too. Yeah. So therefore, well, what am I doing today? Well, I'm getting better. So I don't just wake up and put on my gear that maybe doesn't fit anymore. Asthmatic Sherpa who's like, a little.
Our high school football uniforms.
Yeah. And start trading on high school stories. Yeah. It's like, no, actually, here's what I'm doing today. And I woke up today and I'm a liberator for people and I'm helping these 3 people get to the next level. And then I'm training them. That's why we created these visual tools. We can train people. And so the tools then give them, that's in the 100X Leader book, there's all these tools. You can have them and learn. You don't have to read 20 books. You learn a simple concept and you pass that concept on.
Right.
And then you're helping that person and this person and that person. And all of a sudden they look at you and you're actively being a Sherpa to them, not historically been a Sherpa. Right. So for all those listening to Bondvera to go, you may have had an unbelievable few years, back in the aughts, 2007, 2008, 2009, you were killing it, and you've been trading on that, and almost, it's like, well, dust yourself off. What has to happen now? What would your legacy be? And going, hey, I want to give myself away all the way to the very end.
You want to be in the fight. You want to be in the game all the way up to the very end. Yeah.
It's a way more fun way to live.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so that was the asthmatic Sherpa. You covered that last night, which was, as I said earlier, I think really resonated with a lot of folks. Because it's easy for all of us to fall into that. There's been times where I know that I fall into it. Be like, hey, well, we did this back then. I'm like, okay, no, hold on, time out. What am I doing today to help? And when you start to change that mindset, one of the things that I think that you highlighted with the Sherpa mindset was the fact that as you were interviewing some of these Sherpas who are probably what could be considered some of the top athletes in the world. That's an athletic pursuit to be able to do it, and it's a life and death experience on Everest every single day that you're up there. But you asked a question of a Sherpa, and he said, you know what, that's a very Western question. And it allowed you to unpack a leadership principle I think is really important. I'd like you to share with our listeners.
Yeah, I asked him, I asked them the question that most would ask. Hey, so how many times have you guys, and I was talking to Fanuru Sherpa and some of his other colleagues, and by the way, listeners, they're Sherpa because their last name is Sherpa, because they're a people group. It's really fascinating. Anyway.
So it's like Bob Sherpa, Cindy Sherpa.
Yeah. That's how you know they're a Sherpa. They're actually it's almost like Cherokee Indian, Anyway, so I asked them, I said, how many times have you guys made it to the top? Like, how many times have you summited? Thinking, well, that's a good question. And they all looked and started laughing at each other. And they said, Jeremy, that's a very Western approach. The very Western question. Now, the question actually, they said, we don't know, but last year I helped 22 people summit. Another guy said, last year I helped 17 people summit. Like, oh, that was it. It was,
they were framing success completely differently.
Yeah. To them, Mount Everest is a god. So they have a different level of reverence. To the Western climber, it's a bucket list. It's a checkoff, right? So therefore, they view it very differently. Well, they're like, yeah, I helped 17 people summit. That was my job. So to think, listener, if you're listening to this going, what would it take for you to be a Sherpa? Meaning that you're thinking, how many people have you helped get to the next level? How many people are you helping get to that next level? That is a life, leader worth following.
It completely reframes how you look and how you lead and how you're engaging with the people that are around you and looking to you as a leader, right?
Absolutely.
So, Jeremy, doing a slight pivot here on this topic, we've dove into the 100X Leader, which I think is going to be a game-changing book for any leader who is listening to this. But this is the Take the Leap podcast. We're talking about the entrepreneurial journey, and you have been a prolific entrepreneur. I think that most of your excitement comes from entrepreneurial pursuits. I mean, you and I talked back in Atlanta back in the day as you were about ready to launch into, take another big leap in your career to do some new things, which have been extremely successful. For those who are listening, can you maybe share a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, maybe some of the things that you've learned, some of the things that you've experienced? It's a very exciting journey, but there can also be obstacles along the way that you've got to overcome. I'd just like to understand, what drew you to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's great. And I want to encourage everyone listening that it's based on vision, right? So I had a vision early on when I was 18 years old. This sounds really crazy because people are like, what? Were you kind of a nerd? I'm like, yeah, maybe I was just a leadership nerd in that. My vision was I wanted to influence influencers. That's what I told people I wanted to be when I grew up.
At 18 years old.
And I had been mentored by some amazing people. And so I was like, so by the time I was 20, I was I'd just moved to Russia, just turned 21, and living in Moscow, started an economics school.
Was this before the fall of the wall? Or no,
just after.
Just after.
This is 1993, 6 months or so.
Wow, so it's like literally fresh.
Yeah. So started an economics school, we built a marketing consulting business, an accounting training company. And I wanted to figure out how to use the world. So how do I leverage the world to fund me is basically the idea. So let the world fund you to influence it was my motto, a mantra. It still has been.
Okay.
So that really shaped me, right? And so I had a vision of trying to figure out platforms that could help. So Xerox and the Radisson Hotels paid us to do projects for them, and then we turned around and did some, projects for the Russian people to help them. So it was that very holistic approach early on. So very mission-driven, very vision-driven in that regard. And so everything that I've been trying to do is figuring out what are models that will scale. That's really been a game for me. It's like, how do I create things that will scale and help people at the end of the day? So no matter whatever your vision is, then vision should dictate where you go. Some people just go, hey, my vision is to make money. And I go, okay, for me, that's secondary. Money comes. Money has to be the funding agent. But if it was solely to make money, probably my influence is going to be a little different. It would be very transactional and not relational. So my thought is relationship before opportunity. Opportunity comes when you do relationship really well. And so you can have both. You can have relationship and transaction. But if you only go after I'm preaching now. But anyway.
No, go continue.
So my
Preach on.
So my view then is, as I've created all these enterprises and entities, I've been trying to figure out they kind of all fit into this understanding of using business as a platform for influence and how to help people get to the next level. So most all of my companies, my wife and I just started 3 years ago, a modern farmhouse development. And it's 50 houses, 21 houses on 50 acres. Okay. And we built this whole development. Well, it was designed for families to have a different kind of neighborhood. So there's a purpose to it.
Intentional living, and it's beautiful, by the way, outside of Oklahoma City. Yeah,
but it also has, it's called the Prairie at Post for those who want to look at the prairieatpost.com. But it also has a intentional plan to it. So it's the transaction, and we made money. Yeah. It's both and, right?
Right.
So that was kind of the the strategic framework for me, that all of the businesses and things I've done had to kind of be in that genre. So whatever you're listening, if you're listening, what is your vision? And what is it that you really want? And then creating your enterprises or your entrepreneurial activity around that vision. And for me, vision has always driven and dictated what I do.
And as you're pursuing that vision, it's always the road is wide and easy and flat, and there's never any obstacles in the way, and it's just and money, right? It's always sunny, money flows. Yeah. Tell us about the pathway to
reality
seize on your visions.
So they always say, it's always 10 times harder, 10 times longer than you think, right? And it's true. And so at the same time, part of that is the molding, like that. The journey is what molds you. So the journey in entrepreneurship will either ruin people and wear them out, or it'll make them stronger. And so it's like a marathoner, the longer they go, actually they become stronger at the end of a really good marathoner. So that whole idea for me was that, like, I've been perfecting. So I take what I learned here and go, oh, don't do that again. And I collect my 10, 20 things lessons learned so that I become faster and have the right partnerships or the right this and that. And so making less mistakes, but there's still going to be mistakes made. And that's part of the journey and the process. For me, I use something that, I think it was Deming who made this. This is kind of public knowledge. It's called the change equation.
Okay.
And the change equation, I use it constantly. And I think about it all the time. And it's a simple formula. It's C equals D times V times N. It's greater than R. And it basically means this: change equals dissatisfaction with your status quo,
okay,
times your vision for the future,
okay,
times the next steps to get to that vision have to be greater than the resistance to that vision. So here's what I mean. Start with dissatisfaction. If all of you are listening, if you want to write this out, you can write this little formula. D, what is your dissatisfaction with your status quo, your current situation? Bullet points. Well, I'm frustrated. I'm not making enough. I'm not earning. I thought this was going to work out. It's not. I ... You list your dissatisfaction. Then you go, great, okay, that's fine to have dissatisfaction. Now go to vision. What's your vision? Dust it off. Do you have a vision? Do you know what you want? If your vision is not higher than your dissatisfaction, you'll be hopeless. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs who have become hopeless. So for you listening to go, you have to dust your vision off. Your vision has to be stronger and bigger.
Mm-hmm. This is your dreams for the future.
Yeah.
This
is what I want to be when I grow up. So for us and GiANT, about 18 months ago, we were dissatisfied with our business model. We had a consulting business model, and we were dissatisfied with our gross margin. We were dissatisfied with X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
So we're like, you know what? I don't think it's going to help us because we really believed in our vision. Our vision is to raise up a different kind of leader. We call them liberating leader. Raise up liberating leaders around the world who change their own culture, and it creates a butterfly effect, and they start changing the world by changing their worlds. And that was really our vision. So we feel very strongly about the world using our content as language that can actually change and shape culture, companies, and so forth. So we believed that so much so, but we realized that our dissatisfaction, unless we changed our model, it wasn't going to get to our vision. So our next steps would be, well, we're going to create a leadership platform. We're going to open it up, and anyone, any coach, any consultant, anyone in the world can partner with GiANT and earn income on GiANT TV. That was just an example. Like, so all of those things had to change, but the next steps are really hard, which then leads to your resistance. What's the resistance to that vision in those next steps? Well, the resistance would be, what are the barriers? We didn't really have any barriers. We didn't have any regulations we had to work around.
You could have a partner that wants to go a different direction. That could be resistance.
But that's a hurdle.
That's a hurdle, okay.
So then the next one, so we had barriers, hurdles, and gaps.
Gotcha, okay. I got ahead of you.
So a barrier is anything that you have to work around.
Okay.
So let's say in Bombera's case, FDA, there's certain regulations and there's certain things that there's just laws that are barriers that you have to work around. Then there's hurdles that you have to jump over. It could be a partner attitude. Maybe it's a partner who's so fixated on their own world that they're not realizing they're distracting the organization. That is an issue. That's a hurdle. You have to work around it. Then there's gaps, which are like computers, software systems, or a specific role that you need to fill, or there's a hole. We don't have this skill set in our organization. So when you lay them all out, you go, hey, this is actually a formula for change. Okay. Dissatisfaction, got it. Vision, that went up a notch. Next steps, resistance, then you have your game plan right there. That makes sense?
It makes perfect sense. And so this is something that you've kind of used as an entrepreneur throughout your journey, not only personally, but also within the companies that you're leading to say, hey, let's craft our strategic game plan. Let's take a look at this. I love it.
So a real quick example of this, my parents, 70 years old plus, and they're dissatisfied with their farmers. They have, 1,000 acres or so in Oklahoma.
And farming right now is getting really tough.
They're 70 years old, getting older.
Yeah.
Combines, the price of a combine is used $250,000, new $450,000. Wow. Do they want to invest in that at their age? Tariffs aren't helping. Price isn't helping, the commodity pricing. So all of a sudden, and there's no help from the government, and that people hear that, but there's not really. Dissatisfaction is really, really high.
Right.
Then vision. So I went through this process with my parents. The vision was pretty low. Their vision was to help their parents. 3 out of 4 of them had passed away. So we have one grandparent left. Well, that's not a vision. That's just a short-term. So they had to go, what is our vision? Married at our age, what do we want? What do we want when we grow up? What do we really, really want, right? So that's what vision had to be. Well, they were becoming hopeless because their vision was a little dulled and the dissatisfaction was high.
Oh, yeah.
So then we go, okay, what are the next steps? Well, what are the assets that we have at the farm? So we started looking and go, hey, we have a corn barn. We have, the next steps are, let's turn it into a wedding venue. Let's create an Airbnb park. let's develop some land that could be used. And all of a sudden,
That's awesome.
The vision went back up.
Right.
The next steps became, okay, well, we know how to do this. This is what my wife does. And she's a developer. And, and so what's the resistance? Any barriers? No, we're out of city limits. There's no, what are the hurdles? That's going to be a lot of work. What are the gaps? Well, we have a few people we're going to need to hire. And so, see what I mean?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we reframed an entrepreneurial activity based on this change equation, and their hopes went up.
So you took, again, this is you going back to saying, Bob, I believe one of my superpowers, and we talked about superpowers this morning, but you said one of my superpowers is taking very complex situations and breaking it down and helping people to be able to understand it so they could take action on it. It's just interesting to see how you did that with your parents, because I could see there's a lot of people late in life, and they're dissatisfied, unhappy, but really not knowing the reason why or where they want to go. How do I even change? It just seems like this big murky mess. You just walk in and say, here's the equation.
That's it. So it's the process. So you got to get your mind there, because a lot of people listening, all of us as human nature, we have a way of thinking, and then we also have personalities. Well, our personalities will dictate our tendencies. So some of us have a tendency to be negative first, say no before we say yes. Some of us say yes too fast. So in looking at a business venture, some of us are not risk takers. So we're so risk averse that we limit what could be. And so what has to happen is you actually have to go back to vision. I just believe vision so if you really, really want something, then you'll do way, way more. But if you just want incremental, I just want 2,000 more a month. If I could just have 2,000 more a month, that's all. Okay, really? Is that the vision? That will not sustain you. That will not drive you. You'll do whatever it takes to get 2,000 a month. And everyone around you will feel it. You're just transactional.
Right.
But to go, no, actually, I want to build a business. I mean, that's the beauty of Bonvera. You can build a business, but you got to have a bigger vision. What is the vision of my life? Well, the vision could be, I heard, someone last night, what's her name? The dental hygienist that was right before me. They introduced me.
Nicole Porter.
Yeah, Nicole Porter. She was like, hey, I was a dental hygienist. I know that. My wife is a dental hygienist. So she's in a rhythm. She has a job. She's getting paid for her time. Well, Bonvera gives an opportunity to build something way bigger. So for her, she had a bigger vision of a lifestyle. So it was actually a lifestyle change.
Right.
Awesome. That's a vision. Great. And then Bonvera was the platform or the vehicle for that to happen. That's the beauty of your business. You can give people that, but it's got to be more than just money.
Right.
Money's a part of it.
Right.
So absolutely, that's part of it. Wouldn't it be nice but I also have time and money, but also what if Bonvera was your platform for influence? What if you could use this platform to actually go, I'm going to be a 100x leader. I'm going to be a multiplier. I'm going to use this business to have influence and impact in people's lives from a leadership perspective, from all different holistic perspective. I'm going to make people better. And that became your vision. Then the platform of Bonvera, the platform of anything, then is then used in that way. And that's just a different mindset.
It's a game changer for me in my life when I have had either, like, let's say, a personal goal, and then when I've had a goal that's been more team oriented, where I felt like I was part of a bigger cause and I was helping other things. Like, so I absolutely loved serving when I was in the military, because I felt like I knew I was a part of something bigger than myself, doing something very important. And I think one of the things that you've highlighted there, and I see the people that have been uber successful that I really appreciate, very rarely, and you're a classic example of this, very rarely do they talk about things that are their own personal goals. Certainly they have them. But what really motivates them and excites them is that Sherpa mindset that you've been talking about, where their real goal, their real passion is, there's things that I want to do, but I really get excited when I help other people achieve. When I can take somebody a family member, a friend who's been hopeless, or someone who's been trying to do something, hasn't been able to have success in life, who's been trying to accomplish whatever, and you help them get across the finish line, you help them achieve their goals. There's just something absolutely magical and empowering about helping other people live their best life.
Absolutely. It actually is transformational in your own life, because it is the fuel. So if you think about coal,
Right.
it's the fuel inside us. When that takes place, when that happens, all of a sudden we want to do it more and more. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a drug.
Right.
Like, hey, I want to help. So getting people to the next level. So what you need to do then is think, who are the people in my life? And can you start assuming the best in them, not expecting the worst?
Mm-hmm.
Can you start looking at who they really are? And then the phrase that we use in the Sherpa in the 100X book is call them up, not call them out. So how do you call people up to what you see that they could be? Not call them out for not being there.
Ooh, that's an important principle.
And so we have this famous story of one of our clients who is who did a.
We got some people next door who are having a good time.
It's kind of loud, but he is an umpire. He's an umpire of a 10-year-old baseball game, and he was telling the story that was behind the catcher, a little 10-year-old, and the catcher, the fly ball goes up in the air, and the catcher doesn't take his mask off. The ball falls behind him and misses the out. So the coach comes out and says, Tommy, look at me, pull your head out, Tommy, pull your head out. And half of the audience, half the crowd was like, did he just say pull your head out to a 10-year-old? And the other half is like, yeah, Tommy, pull your head out. Like, that's all. So then Tommy goes and gets the ball, doesn't know what to do, just throws the ball back. And what is he thinking the whole time? Yeah. Don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up.
Yeah, I'm going to get yelled. Everyone's watching me.
I'm embarrassed. I can't believe I did that. What did I do? Right? The next inning, other team comes out. Same thing happened with the other catcher. The ball goes up, falls behind him. The coach comes out and says, hey, Kevin, look here, bud. Look, mask off, pivot your feet, look up, the ball will be there. Now, come on. Right? Same play. So it's like, which coach would you want to work for? Which coach would you want your kid playing for?
Right.
Pull your head out is calling people out. It's what most of us have learned how to do.
Right.
I'm frustrated. Dang it. I'm mad. Dadgummit. Don't do that again.
Yeah.
That's not training. Training is, hey, I'm frustrated. It's high support, high challenge. Still bringing challenge. If I'm going to use the same amount of time to call people out, wouldn't it have been better if I call people up? So oftentimes I'll tell people like, Amy, this is who you are. Or Dan, come on, don't you see it? This is who you are. What's going on?
Yeah. You're this type of leader. You're this type of performer. You're not there, but you can do it. And here's
I know
how.
who you are.
Right.
Why? What's going on down here? Why are you down here? And you cause people to self-reflect on why they're down there, and then they'll lead themselves up the mountain. It's a completely different deal.
So in a business context, let's say you're calling somebody up, and it's a high performer.
Yeah.
And they've been performing at a high level for quite some time. And they are not performing there now, and you want to call them up. And they give you, let's say it's someone on your team, they're giving you an excuse. They're like, well, it's because of X, Y, and Z. And you know that is a manufactured excuse that they're using that as a protective cover for their lack of performance. How do you address that with that individual? Do you continue to call them up, or do you address that excuse and you say, hey, Sally, I know that's what you think. I know that's what you're saying because it's plausible. But that excuse is not valid.
So the first thing that has to be established in the culture is objective language.
Okay.
Meaning that we create tools that everyone needs to understand. Because if I have the tools, if not, it's subjective. So subjective is, hey, I need you to just step it up, Bob. I know who you are. Step it up. Come on. All right. I don't know what that means. So if I give objective language and some visual tools. So one of the things we always say is your job as a leader, you're looking for people to be responsive, not resistant. If they're resistant consistently and you given them a chance to be responsive, but they continue to be resistant, then they probably shouldn't be on the team. Then you need to let them go. But you need to be able to tell them that. What I do all the time with my people is I always let them know where we're at. So we use this process called developing others, and there's unconscious incompetence, then there's conscious incompetence. So I will state with people, hey guys, I think we're starting a new division. I know we're clueless. We're all unconsciously incompetent right now. I just want you all to know that I know that we are, and it's okay. We're going to learn. Then we're going to consciously be incompetent. Then together we're going to talk about that. We're in a consciously incompetent stage. all of us need to move to conscious competence.
Mm-hmm.
Like we need to know, so what has to happen for us to get there? So I'm using that language constantly for people so that when there is an issue, when someone screws up, I can go, come on now, Jay, really? We're up here, bud. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you at? And do you see it? And if anyone gives me an excuse, I go, is this resistance right now? And so I'm giving them the chance to have to answer the question because they know the language.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does.
So that gives them a fair shot. So there are no excuses. Guys, I know we've been in conscious incompetence, but this has been happening way too long.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be over here by now. What's it going to take to get you over here? What do you need from me? Do you need more support? What support can I give you?
Mm-hmm.
Or people will always know this. I'll say, let's say we're working together and there's an issue. Hey, Bob, you know I'm for you, right?
Right.
That means challenge is about to come.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know I'm for you,
we're friends. We're friends. I'm for you. I want your best.
I'm going to call you up.
Yep, I'm going to call you up.
Sometimes I'm noticing that this is happening. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
I give them the chance to address it. I say, here's the issue. What's happening? Letting them, I can then see, by asking that question, I can see how they're thinking. If they start giving me excuses, then I have the language to start shaping that, right? So it's always a process and a journey. We have something called a performance diagnostic, which then goes through and it first asks the question, it's like a list. Is it us? Meaning, is our culture changed and they haven't been performing? So if someone's not performing very well long term, and you've had lots of conversations and they've kind of been semi-resistant, but acting like responsive, I go through the performance diagnostic and go, is it us? Did the company change? Is it our values that's affected them? No, nothing's changed. We're good. Okay. Have I given them enough training for their job?
Mm-hmm.
Have I given them enough?
So you're putting it on you to start. Maybe I failed.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Sherpa starts with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Did I put the ropes down? I did put the ladder there.
Yeah.
So they had it all right. Yeah. So it wasn't that.
Okay.
I gave them enough support. I gave them enough challenge. Is it a competency issue? Do they actually know what to do? No, they don't. Oh, okay. Is there another position in the organization? No. Okay, that's head. Let's go to heart. Are they passionate about the company and the organization? Yeah, they're totally passionate. Is there any values infringement? No, they're a good person. So it wasn't their heart. It's a head issue. They're not, gosh, we can't afford to keep them on at that level because we don't have unlimited resources.
Right.
And that person's taking a position. What can I do to help them? Right. So you've got a checklist, but it always starts with you first. And most leaders are always starting to call out first. Dadgummit, Bob.
Why didn't you?
Why didn't you? Well, actually,
look in the mirror first.
You have no support lines. I don't even know what to do. You've never spent one. I spent time with this head coach of a major program. He told me, I've never, ever had, with his last 3 jobs, he was an assistant coach. He said, I never met with the coach face to face. Any of the coaches, one-to-one.
How is that even possible?
What? I was shocked. He goes, you'd be surprised how much that happens. So I was always in a team meeting, but never had a one-to-one with my head coaches. Wow. So he didn't know how to do that with other people.
Right.
So he didn't know how to call people up. He knew how to call people out because that's all he had ever experienced.
It's a complete mindset shift. All right. So on your entrepreneurial journey, for young entrepreneurs, and it's interesting. We've actually been talking an awful lot about leadership, about personal leadership, and I think that is so critical in the entrepreneurial journey. I don't think you can be a successful entrepreneur unless you are first starting with personal development, understanding and honing your leadership skills, because you've got to know yourself to lead yourself. That's one of your quotes. And then you also have to be able to lead others. Entrepreneurship is not a solo sport, it's a team sport.
That's right.
So for those who are listening, what are maybe, as we're winding down this episode, what are some things maybe that you've learned? Any either through successes or failures. And I know that if you're probably an awful lot like me, you learn a lot more from your failures at times than you do your successes. What are things that you've learned on your journey that you'd share with some folks?
My dad always said this in my 20s, and it was really helpful. So if you're a young leader, young entrepreneur, it's not what you do, it's who you work for that's most important. So actually learning and coming underneath someone and being apprenticed by someone will speed up the process so quickly. So I learned, my guy was Kent Humphreys. Kent Humphreys
Really?
showed me the ropes. So Kent, I was a leader underneath Kent, and so I learned so much just from being underneath him. And he was an entrepreneur, so I got to learn and understand financials. I got to learn how he dealt with employees. I saw just kind of but he was support and challenge, man. I'm telling you, he was like, you did not. Super nice, amazing person, and super challenging, which was just so refreshing. That's why we need more of these kind of people. So that would be one thing that I would always say. The second one, and I said this before, was really, really knowing your vision and testing your vision to go, is it real? What do you really, really want? And is it real? And I think, will
it motivate you when you're going through the really tough obstacles? Will you still be like, I'm doing it because that vision is real?
That's right. And then the third one would be, this is really hard for me. The circumstances don't dictate your behavior. Like, how do you treat circumstances? This is a newly learned skill and trait I'm trying to learn. How do you let circumstances lead to upgrades? Meaning, how do you take negative circumstances and they don't change your behavior? But negative circumstances actually produce an upgrade in you. They produce perseverance. They actually produce a whole nother level. So it's almost like the more negative circumstances, the more it fuels me for positive, not for negative.
It's almost like a Navy SEAL mindset. You talk to high performers in combat situations. It's like when the bullets start flying, they start performing even at a different level. Where everybody else is kind of cowers and hide in the corner, they're stepping into it and being like, "All right, I'm ready to go." Right. So it's a Navy SEAL mindset there.
Yeah. It's motivating. It's fueling, and so that's one where I think the best entrepreneurs I've found, because setbacks, missed expectations, bad partnerships, all those things are going to happen. But if I've been around I've counseled so many entrepreneurs who all of those things piled on, and they got defeated as a person. Then they chose some addiction. They left their wife. They chose, I'm just going to go after money. And they sold out.
Get jaded and be like, all right, screw this, I'm done.
And, I was on an airplane once with this guy, and he's like, it was so funny. This is a crazy story. You'll love it because of the year past. So how we got the Air Force. This happened on an airplane. I'm with this guy, and I didn't want to talk. I'd been speaking all day. Kind of had my headphones in, and this guy had drunk a few vodka tonics, and he was a little bit loose. He found out he's an entrepreneur. He starts asking me questions, and I start answering them. And then he starts then saying, "So you believe in partnerships, huh?" I go, "Yeah, I'm in several partnerships. I believe in them." He goes, "All my partnerships," and he starts really laying into all of his partners. He had 4 partnerships that had gone bad. He had been on the 3rd marriage.
Oh, wow.
And so he starts negatively talking about every single one of them. And I go,
is there a common
thread? His name was Bill. And I go, "Hey, Bill." And I pulled out my 2x4 and I put velvet around it, basically with this question. I go, "Bill, do you think it might be you?" And it just struck him like so hard. And he was like, "What?
What did you just say to me? What did you say? You just went there with me on a plane. Boom. Okay.
Do you think it might be you? And he just started tearing up, and like it really got him. And I don't know if it was the booze or the question, but whatever happened, he just starts admitting. And he goes, "I had this and this and this, and I've never really had one mentor me, and blah 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 blah. And would you help me?" I'm like, "Absolutely, man. Be glad to." So I thought, well, this guy's for sure going to call me because it was a powerful. I gave him 3 or 4 tips and things he can do with an immediate partnership. Gave him my card. He was like, he was profusely thanking me, hugged me on the way out. I mean, it was like crazy situation.
Right. It's like right out of a movie.
Yeah. Never calls me, ever. The guy never called me. 2 days later, I get an email because I didn't have a card. I gave him my email and he wrote it down. That's what happened. 2 days later, I get an email and he goes, "Hey, my name is Bill DeMarco. and I hate to say this, but I feel like a stalker here, but I overheard that entire conversation on the airplane. That was the craziest and boldest thing I've ever heard. And that's what every leader needs to do. Your counsel, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, it was so impactful and helpful for me.
This is a passenger that was like behind you or somewhere on the...
Yeah, 2 rows ahead of me.
Okay.
And he listens, gets the email, and he is Colonel DeMarco. That's how he got in the U.S. Air Force from that conversation.
Oh, my goodness.
So now we train all the captains and majors on the 5 voices, and now they're training on it, all because I had the guts on an airplane
to speak truth.
To speak truth.
To someone who needed it.
To call somebody up. This is who you could be. This is what you can be. And it led us to this. Isn't that crazy?
That is a crazy story. You highlight, I just want to share this, but you highlight something that's very important, is that you had the guts to call somebody up, to speak truth into their life, even when you knew it may not be accepted. And a lot of times I hear of coaches, mentors, people who are working with a particular individual, and they see the issue. They know what the issue is. And I've heard this multiple times. It literally pains me when I hear it. I say, well, I can't speak truth to that person because they're not ready to hear it. I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, how long is that individual going to have to stay in that spot? Now, I intuitively get why a person wouldn't want to speak truth to an individual because they're not ready to hear it, because there's going to be conflict, there's going to be friction, there could be all those types of things. But I think to myself, isn't that the role of a coach and a mentor, is to speak truth to people even when they don't want to hear it, even when they're not ready to hear it, because that's the only way that person's going to get better. How do you navigate that?
So we always say, is someone unripe, ripening, or ripe, right? And so there's a process. Well, we put tools in the water stream, and visual and common language, those tools do the heavy lifting. So a lot of times I'll put a tool in, and it becomes a mirror, and it starts unripe people, and it starts ripening them faster. So the visual tools with common language actually can, as a tool, creates change. If I tell you you have broccoli in your teeth, you'll go, oh yeah, well you've got broccoli in your teeth too. Yeah. And so that pride will elevate if I tell someone to do it. But if I show them something and then I explain, hey, here's what happened to me, and I'm vulnerable and share my own weakness, it may move someone from unripe to ripening, and then they could be ripe for the opportunity to actually see transformation. So I think that's the importance of common language, vulnerability, sharing your own weakness, and just being secure. I'm just secure. I have screwed up a lot. I'm secure. Right. I don't have anything to prove. It's like, this is the reality. But I also have a really strong vision and a big passion for things.
Well, it's interesting because you, as you highlight that, I think that one of the things that you're very gifted at, and you shared this last night when you were speaking, you were able to encourage people and build trust and credibility by being transparent and being vulnerable. You didn't have to be the smartest guy on the stage, right? You were using areas, and you were saying, hey, look, here's where I've messed up. Even recently, I made a mistake here, and here's how I overcame it. I think some people feel that they've got to be the smartest, the strongest, the most successful, that they've got to this be perfect, and then that they've got to teach and influence from this high stature of perfection. Be like, no, I think the best teachers are people who are vulnerable and open up and say, hey, look, I struggle, I fail in these areas. Here's what I'm working. Here's how you, right?
It's real. People follow genuine, authentic. It's real. It's just real. I'm not trying to prove myself. I've got things that people can use. I've been there. I've done it. Right. But my motive is different. And I think that's a key component. Is I have this phrase: I have nothing to prove, nothing to fear, nothing to lose. If I can stay in that mindset, if I can get there, nothing to fear, nothing to prove, nothing to lose. Think about how much more secure you could be as an entrepreneur. That's when you walk into superpower, when you can get past those things.
Wow. Real quickly as we close up here, you're a prolific author, best-selling author. Outside of your own books, which they are phenomenal. We're going to have the 100X Leader and 5 Voices. We'll also put 5 Gears in the show notes, and these are books that we at Bonvera are going to be using our own leadership teams. And, I've used them in the past when I was at Crown, and we've had multiple leaders that have gone through your training program. But what are other books, either a book that you're currently reading that's been really impactful?
Do you mean outside of Bob Dickey books?
Yeah, you can't mention any books that I've written.
The number one book that for me, my number one book in the last 10 years has been called Heroic Leadership by Chris Lowney.
Okay.
It was the story of how the Jesuits have been around for 450 years. How it's unbelievable. It's got history, it's got leadership, it's got story. It was so impactful on us and our business. So that would be it. That's a book. If you want a leadership book from
Heroic Leadership.
Heroic Leadership by Chris Lowney.
Okay.
About the Jesuits. And man, it really shaped us big time.
You're a prolific traveler, and you're very, very busy. Do you have any particular life hacks or things that you do to kind of help you stay focused and stay organized and be productive while you're on the road and in this hectic season of your life?
Yeah, so probably do have a lot. I haven't thought of them as much, but Delta helps once you get into the Sky Miles program. So being Diamond helps.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it sure makes it easier. So the Sky Club and all those things.
We'll see if Delta will sponsor this podcast
now.
Yeah,
absolutely. So,
I'm a Delta Diamond as well, so I know anytime that I've been canceled somewhere, I just have that magic 1-800 number, call them up, and it's things just happen. So I love it. Yeah.
So that helps a lot, right? So what I do, my life hack is I have my music, so I have a little playlist, and I create a playlist probably every 2 or 3 months, and it's just my music for travel or whatever season I'm in, because I like music. I'm motivated that way. But I also have this thing where I pray for people of peace, and I look for people of peace. And so what happens every morning when I turn the shower on? God, who do you want me to help today? Is there anyone that you want me to heal or help or something that help them get solve an issue? And what that does when I'm on the road is I meet have the craziest situations happen, and I'm helping people. And when I do that, it literally makes the trip more fun, because it's not about I got to do this and this and this. I'm looking for people. I'm like, and so I meet people and have these experiences that are book worthy. They're stories, and they're pretty crazy.
Share a little more about looking for and praying for meeting people at peace. Because you were sharing a little bit about this morning. I'd like to, because you want to be able to walk within your superpower, and you talked about a badge and a gun. Just real quickly highlight that.
Well, you look at how Jesus changed the world. Whether you believe he was a teacher, prophet, Messiah, it doesn't matter. Whatever you think that he was. How he changed the world was he got a bunch of blokes and just regular guys, and he equipped them, and he gave them power and authority, and they actually walked out, and they did it. They just healed. They took things out of people, and they called people up. They raised them up. And so I just do that. I've looked for people of peace. So he told them, find people of peace and stay with them. Don't go on to the next place. Just stay there and serve them, help them. And when you do that, basically, he had said, God will take care of you through the people that you've helped. And so it's just a more fun way of living. So I think that's my life hack. Is I've figured out that I can wake up every day and I'm going to find someone to help. And in the process of helping, it not only fueled me, but it also took care of us. A lot of times they become, in your case, they could become a Bonvera entrepreneur. In our case, maybe they become a coach or consultant, or they use GiANT in some way. So that's how we get into our clients, as people experience who we are. We live liberation as a lifestyle. So if you live liberation as a lifestyle, it's natural, it's genuine. So when they meet you, they want more of you.
Right.
It wasn't a shtick. It's not something I'm selling. It is who we are. And that's my life hack, is be genuine, be real. And as you go, you meet people along the way that kind of make the journey fun.
That's a great way for us to close off this particular episode. Jeremie, you not only live these principles and teach these principles, but it's motivating and encouraging to be around you, because I see it in multifaceted in your life. but flipping the whole entrepreneurial pursuit and realm somewhat on its head by being first and foremost an intentional leader and looking how you can serve and love on others, help them to live their best life. And because of it, you've been uber successful. And so I'm going to continue to wish you the best, pray for success for you and your family and everything that you're doing at GiANT, and the great work that you're doing in companies, not only here within the United States, but teaching and training and equipping leaders around the world. We really thank you for being a part of the podcast, and certainly we'll have all of the show notes full of books and resources that you and your company are providing. So for those of you that have been listening today, I hope you really enjoyed this episode with Jeremie Kubicek, the CEO and founder of GiANT. Make sure to share this episode with friends and family. And if you would like to have someone be on this show, someone that you think that would be a great person to interview and give some thoughts and insights, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact us, and we'll do our best to record that individual. Thank you so much, and until next time, have a wonderful life.